Whether you're brand new to prepping or an old pro giving your plans a checkup, this should be your first step. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Today I want to talk to you about emergency water storage. We have had a lot of questions lately about what we do, about what we recommend, so I thought that I would go over that today. So I'm going to share with you what we do. Now our system, it's what works for us. It's far from perfect or complete, and like every other aspect of our preparedness plan, it's a work in progress. We are constantly learning, making changes, and always adding to our supply whenever we can. So this is what works for us. Each person's and each family's plan is going to look a little different. There are a lot of different options, and there are a lot of different considerations, such as budget and space, that are going to be different for everyone. There is no doubt that water is one of the most important aspects of any preparedness plan. I'm sure you've heard it before. You can only live 3 days without water, and after day 1, the rest is not going to be very pretty. And besides that, water is necessary for so many other things as well, besides just drinking, such as hygiene, probably cooking some of that food that you have stored. Although everyone's emergency water plan is going to look a little different, there's one thing that will be the same for everyone, and that's that your plan really needs to be multifaceted. You need to have clean drinking water stored, but you also need to have a means, and preferably more than one means, of filtering and or purifying additional water. You don't want to rely on just one or the other. It's important to identify water sources outside your home and make sure that you have ways to make it safe to drink, because it's virtually impossible to store the amount of water that you would need for an extended grid down emergency. Let's think about this for a minute. The absolute bare minimum that you should store is 1 gallon per person per day. So that means that for a family of 4, just 1 week of water would be over 25 gallons. And that doesn't even account for any pets or livestock you may have. So we need to have options prepared for when our stored water runs out. But on the flip side, we also shouldn't rely only on gathering water outside the home. During times of emergency, it's highly likely that conditions outside might be such that it would be impossible or at least unadvisable to leave your home. In many cases, there may also be concern about contamination of unprotected water sources. Maybe there's a storm raging outside your home, such as a hurricane, a blizzard, or an ice storm. Maybe there's rioting in your neighborhood, or there's been some type of chemical, biological, or nuclear attack. It's important to have as much clean, safe water available as possible in your home. Years ago, when we first started getting serious about preparedness, I started out with a very dismissive attitude about water. I mean, yes, we had a few gallons stored, but I told myself we would be fine because we had a river in our backyard and a water filter. I soon wised up and realized we needed to store a lot more water. We have also since added to our filtering options and added a rain catchment system. Come along and I'll show you our emergency water system and let you know why it works for us. Then at the end, I'll go over some other options that you may want to consider, so make sure you stay tuned until the end. Now, the heart of my water storage system is these jugs right here and right here. These are 5-gallon jugs, and these are some 3-gallon jugs that are stackable. Now, the reason I use these is pretty simple. We have a water cooler upstairs that we use on a regular basis. I love having a water cooler. It just makes us more likely to drink more water if we've got a fresh, cold water that's readily available. But the second reason that I really love it is for the hot water. We always have one with a hot water option, and that makes it super easy for the kids to make themselves oatmeal, instant oatmeal, ramen noodles, tea, hot cocoa, anything. You don't have to wait for the hot water. Just a push of a button and you've got hot water. So we use a water cooler regularly. So we do use these jugs. So what I started doing was buying these jugs. These are refillable ones. I buy them empty and I just fill them from our tap and I store them down here. And so we rotate them on and off of our water cooler, because anytime you're storing anything for prepping, any food, any water, any fuel, they all need to be rotated. And to me, it's a lot easier to rotate something that I'm using regularly because I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, say, okay, this is going to sit here for a year and then I'm going to dump it and I'm going to refill it. No, this is going to be used regardless of whether we have an emergency or not. And we're just going to refill it and keep this supply here all the time. So that's why I use these types of bottles as my main water storage. And then we also have cases of water bottles. Now, once again, this is something that we do use on a regular basis. So these get used, these get rotated. Once again, it's something that I don't have to think about rotating. Now, each one of these are 40 packs from Walmart, and there's some other 40 packs down here, I think, and these are smaller packs, but each one of these 40 packs has a little bit over 5 gallons in it. So we've got about 9 of these packs worth. And so that's about another 45 gallons of water here. And we try to keep adding to this supply and definitely replenishing it as we take from it, because we do use these. We try to use reusable water bottles a lot of the time, but sometimes we're grabbing these if we're in a hurry or if the kids are going somewhere that I'm afraid they might lose their bottle. We grab these. I always keep a case of this in my car so that we have water in the car at all times. Now this, a lot of people don't like to store water in their car in these plastic bottles, especially during the summertime or if they live in a hot climate, because the heat can make some of the chemicals leach out of the plastic and it's just not very good for you. But we actually do take from the ones in the car. You know, we might show up to a sports practice and somebody realizes they forgot their water, or, you know, one of their friends is asking for a water. So we do take from that so they don't sit in the car very long. And during the summer, I am usually parked inside the garage. It's usually pretty cool. My vehicle doesn't get really hot inside very often. So I'm okay with keeping a case of water in my car at all times. I would much rather have it than not have it. In the winter, sometimes it freezes, but once again, it's much better to have it and be able to thaw it out than to be stuck somewhere with no water. It's important to have smaller bottles in addition to larger bottles because these are more portable and you can grab these and take these with you if you needed to evacuate, if you needed to bug out. These jugs are pretty portable. They're much more portable than, say, a 50-gallon tank or something like that. I can definitely load these into my car. In fact, sometimes we take them to a nearby spring and fill them up in the car and bring them home. So they're definitely portable. They do have a handle on these jugs and these could be carried around, but we do have things like this that are easier to carry around. We also have some smaller jugs. Now, this is an option if you want to do it on a budget. This is probably a good option for you. Some of these are just drink jugs that I have washed out and refilled. You want to wash them really well and then sanitize them with a mild bleach solution. Just, you know, a couple tablespoons of bleach to a gallon of water, or maybe pour a quarter cup into your sink and sanitize these and let them dry and then fill them with clean water. These are reused drink bottles. You could also use 2-liter soda bottles. These are water jugs that I did purchase full of water. But the important thing here is this type of plastic is going to last longer than this type of plastic. Now, this is distilled water. We use a lot of distilled water during the holidays because we run fog machines for our holiday display. So this is just a leftover. So I did store it with our water. But these containers are a lot more apt to spring leaks a lot more easily than this type of plastic. So if you're going to be storing in things like this, you definitely want this type of plastic if you can. You can reuse drink bottles. It's important not to store your water directly on cement in a garage, a basement. So we have these up on a wooden platform. But whatever kind of storage containers work for you, whatever kind will fit into your home and whatever kind will fit into your budget are best. I will go over some other containers that you can use towards the end of the video. This is what I use. These are what I use. Now, you could store containers like this. If you were storing it in smaller bottles or pop bottles or something, you could put those right under your bed even. If I put them under my bed, I would probably want to put them inside of a plastic under the bed storage box just in case anything sprung a leak. Down here in the cellar, we're not really worried about anything springing a leak, although we haven't had that happen. One thing that I am trying to train myself to do is write the date on the tops of these jugs when I fill them so that it's easier for us to make sure that they stay in the right order. Like I said, we do rotate these, we do use these regularly, so I'm not really concerned about them going out of date unless we were to get a lot more bottles, because you can store water easily for 6 months to a year before you would have to worry about dumping it out and refilling it. And if you wanted to store it longer than that, there is a water preserver that you can buy that can let you store your water for 5 years. If I had a larger container that we weren't using regularly, I would certainly use the water preserver. But what I'm trying to train myself to do is to write the dates that I fill these, and I like to use a wet erase marker because these will stay on longer than a dry erase. They won't rub off as easily, but they will come off a lot more easily than, say, a permanent marker. And the cost of these bottles has gone up recently, just like the cost of most plastic items, but I still find it to be more cost effective than buying. I used to buy bottles, 4-gallon bottles at Sam's Club that were already full of water, and they were just over $4, and they were a single-use bottle. I could usually refill it a few times before it would get start to collapse and break down, but it wasn't reusable for as long as these are, and so I was disposing of these. So even though these are a little bit more expensive, as long as I'm refilling them a few times, they will pay for themselves. Another thing to note when you're using this type of bottle, or really any type of container that you're using, but if you're using these, you need to think about how you're going to get the water out of the bottle. If you have a water cooler, obviously, that will work. Even if there's no power, gravity will feed room temperature water through the water cooler. So that's what we would do. But if you don't have a water cooler and you're using this type of bottle, they do sell pumps. They sell hand pumps and they sell battery operated pumps, rechargeable pumps that you can put. They're pretty inexpensive. You can put them right on the top of the jug and they'll pump the water out for you. You can also get an inexpensive stand that you can put this on that would hold it upside down and allow you to dispense the water. There's also pumps that you can get for larger 55-gallon barrels if you use that for water. Some containers that you might choose to use would have a spigot built right in, and that's really handy if they have that. And then if you have something like a 55-gallon drum full of water, they also have pumps that you can use to get the water out of those. But that's something that you need to think about as well. Now, another part of our emergency water plan is our rain catchment system. And this is out behind the garage. The water comes off the roof of the garage and comes down into these 3 barrels. These are 3 55-gallon barrels that are food safe, and we do use this system. We set this up when we got our garden set up so that we could use this to water our garden, and we also use this to water our chickens and our ducks. So this water is being used and it is being rotated constantly through use. This hose system goes down to where the ducks and chickens are and down to the garden, and we have a whole gravity fed system that feeds the whole garden without using any electricity or anything like that. We do have a video, a little bit more in-depth video on that system, so we'll make sure to have links for that if you're interested. But we do, if these get empty at all, we can refill them from our hose to make sure that we always have a good system of water here. Now, if we were to use this for drinking in an emergency, we would certainly filter and treat this water. But it's been working great for the garden and the birds, and it really feels good knowing that we have this supply of water in addition to the water that we have stored inside the house. So if you have the space and you're able and it's allowed in your area, you might want to see if you can set up something like this. It doesn't even have to be this big. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be pretty, obviously, but it just can give you an extra backup source of water for emergencies, as well as helping lower your water bill by alleviating some of your water use. If you use it to water your lawn, use it to water your garden, anything like that, you'll be using less of the water that you have to pay for. Now, I mentioned that we have a river on our property. This is in our backyard. It's not actually a river. This is a little brook, and it does feed into the larger river just down past our property. And I definitely feel blessed to have this on our property because not only is it a source of water, but it's also a source of food because we can fish in the river. Now, just like the rain barrels, if we were to use this water for drinking or for cooking, we would certainly want to filter it and treat it to make it safe to drink, to make sure that it's safe to drink and clean. But it's definitely a blessing to have this, and we can use this for other things also. We have even used this when we are expecting a storm. We might be expecting a power outage. We might lose our water. We've come down and scooped up a few buckets from the river to have in the house for toilet flushing and things like that. So the third part of our emergency water plan, because we've got water that we have stored in the house, we have water sources outside the house that we can get water from if we run out of our stored water. And then the third part of that is that we have ways to filter and treat the water that we get outside of the house. Now, we have several different ways to do this. You always want to have redundancy in your prepping. You always want to have more than one way to do things if you can, in case one way fails, in case you run out. Just don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's 2 different ways that you can treat water for drinking. One is filtering, and the other is sanitizing or disinfecting. Now, the difference is a filter is going to remove things from your water, whereas sanitizing and disinfecting, you're adding something to the water that's going to kill things in the water that could be bad for you, but it's not going to actually remove anything from the water. The simplest things to have are for sanitizing and disinfecting the water. Now, you can disinfect your water with chlorine bleach, and we do store bleach in our home. Mostly because I do use it for laundry. Now, if you buy bleach for this purpose, you want to make sure that you're getting pure chlorine bleach. You want to make sure that it says kills 99.9% of viruses and bacteria or 99.9% of germs, and you want to make sure that it has instructions and labeling on there for sanitizing and disinfecting. You're looking for an active ingredient of sodium hypochlorite and nothing else. You don't want to get any of these fancy bleaches with scents or splashless bleach or any of these other things. You can see just by looking at them, they do not say anything on them about sanitizing, disinfecting, killing germs, killing bacteria, anything like that. They do not have labeling or instructions for sanitizing and disinfecting, and they have other ingredients besides the sodium hypochlorite. You also don't want bleach tablets. I've had a lot of people say to me, why don't you just store bleach tablets? You can store a lot more in less space and they're easy to mix up. I have never found a bleach tablet yet that is for sanitizing and disinfecting. You can see right here on the bottle it says not for sanitizing and disinfection. If you've found bleach tablets out there that are labeled for sanitizing and disinfection, then by all means put it down in the comments and steer me in that direction, but I have not found any so far that do that. Now that's important to me because the basic reason that I do use and store bleach is for sanitizing and disinfecting, even in my laundry. But the big drawback of liquid bleach is that it actually has a pretty short shelf life. The shelf life of the liquid bleach is only about 6 months, so I make sure not to store any more than I can use up in 6 months, and I rotate that stock. After 6 months, it's not necessarily going to go bad. It'll still look and smell like bleach to you, but it's not necessarily going to perform the duties that you're expecting it to perform. So it's not necessarily going to sanitize and disinfect at the same rate that you would expect it to, and you wouldn't even know it. So you got to be careful with liquid bleach. The perfect alternative to liquid bleach for sanitizing water that a lot of preppers use, and this is what we use, this is pool shock. Now you want to make sure with your pool shock that the active ingredient is calcium hypochlorite and only calcium hypochlorite, and you want to make sure that it has at least 68%. Now I've looked at my Walmart for pool shock, and the pool shock I find there does not have the 68% concentration of the calcium hypochlorite. So I end up getting this on Amazon. Now the good thing about the pool shock is that it's relatively inexpensive. It's easy to find in the summer, but you can find it on Amazon all year long. Now what you're doing with the pool shock is you're actually mixing up your own liquid bleach solution, but you're doing it a batch at a time and it stays fresh. The pool shock has a shelf life of at least 5 years, and I've seen some people say indefinitely, but definitely you can get 5 years out of it. Now it's very caustic and it's very corrosive, so you need to be careful with how you store it. You don't want to store it in or near anything metal. So storing it inside of a glass container with a plastic lid is probably best. Don't store it in a mason jar with a metal lid. If you use a glass mason jar, that's great, but put a plastic lid on it. And the pool shock is so concentrated that that 1 pound package, which was fairly inexpensive, will make enough bleach solution to purify water for a family of 4 for many, many years. Now I'll make separate videos on things like how to purify the water with the pool shock and with the bleach and all of that. I don't want this video to end up being hours long, and really if I went into detail on every little thing, it could become very long. So look for more videos coming up. Make sure that you're subscribed, and I'll make sure to have instructions on how to do all these things that I'm talking about. Another option for purifying or sanitizing your water are water purification tablets like these. This is just one brand that I happen to have. It's called Potable Aqua. These are pretty inexpensive and they're pretty easy to find. You can find them at Walmart. You can get them on Amazon. One of the benefits of these is that they're very small. The bottle's very small. The pills inside are very small. They're very portable, easy to carry around with you. One of the drawbacks is the fact that you need 2 of these per quart of water. So you're not going to really be able to store enough of these to last you a long, long time. But these are great to have for a portable solution and for a short-term solution. I have this, which is my little mini first aid kit that goes everywhere with me. And this is just my little mini first aid kit. This is the one that goes everywhere with me. This is always in my purse or whatever bag I'm carrying. And then inside of this is my little pill case, and this does have water purification tablets in it. You can see the main ingredient in these is iodine. That's what it uses to purify the water. You can see that it's kind of turned the little compartment yellow. But I also have given the instructions here, 2 per quart of water. So if I was to run into an emergency away from home, these could be used to purify water in any container that I had. So the other way to treat your water is through filtering. Now the first step of filtering would be pre-filtering. Now pre-filtering is not going to remove any of the really dangerous, really teeny things in the water, but what it is going to do is it's going to remove some of the dirt, debris, sediment, sand, little bits of leaves, anything like that that might be in the water. That's important. Number one, if you're doing something like sanitizing the water with something that you add to it and you're not putting it through a filter, you'll remove some of the bigger debris. And the other thing is that if you are filtering it, you'll help save your filter if you remove some of those things before you put it through your water filter. Some of the things that you can use for pre-filtering, you can use paper coffee filters. We keep these pour over coffee filter holders on hand. They're great to make coffee in an emergency or even not in an emergency, but they can also be used for something like this. Put the paper cone filters in and pre-filter your water. You can also use some kind of fabric that you have on hand. It could be a cotton t-shirt fabric or a dish towel fabric. You could even use a bandana. Those are multi-purpose, wonderful little tools to have for preparedness. They have so many different uses, and one of them can be to pre-filter your water. So after pre-filtering, you can run your water through an actual water filter. Now there's lots of different options for this, for different budgets, for different situations. The first water filter that we ever had was a Sawyer Mini, and we do still have it. These are very common and they're popular. Part of the reason is because they are really inexpensive. They're great if you're on a budget. They do remove things like bacteria and protozoa, and those are the main things that you're going to be worried in most emergency situations. Now I'll put links to all the different filters that I talk about down in the description in case you want to go check them out and see what each one does or doesn't filter out, because there's a lot, and if I try to tell you everything that each filter does or doesn't filter out, we'll be here forever. But the Sawyer Minis are a great place to start if you're on a budget. They'll filter thousands and thousands of gallons of water, and they're very inexpensive. Now we also have life straws. I have mine in a case, but these are pretty popular also. They have benefits of being very inexpensive and very small and portable. They do have a lot of drawbacks. They are really a single person use because you put your mouth right on that and you put it right into your water source. You're either going to put it down into, the lake you're drinking out of or whatever, but you could also take the water up into a container and drink out of that. But if you do use life straws, you're going to want to have one for every member of your family. If you were in a dire, desperate situation, of course you would share one, but it's really a single person use item. It is somewhat limited in what it filters out, but it does filter out the main things that you're going to be concerned about in most emergency situations. But it's really portable. It can be kept in your vehicle. It can be kept in your bug out bag. They can be kept just about anywhere, and they're inexpensive. So they're a great thing to have around. So the filters that I've shown you so far are pretty inexpensive, small, portable type of filters. They're great for starting out if you're on a budget. That's what we started out with. Now we have a Berkey. This is what we have for our home. This does several gallons of water at a time. The Berkeys are known to be one of the gold standards for prepping for home filters. It's got a spigot here. You just put the water in up here. It filters everything. These are pretty expensive, and the filters are pretty expensive, but they really do filter out a lot. There's another brand, the Alexa Pure Pro, that is very similar to this, and it actually has some benefits over the Berkey. It's not as popular or as well known, but the Alexa Pure Pro, it looks very similar. It works very similarly. But the Berkey, if you want it to filter out fluoride, you have to put an extra filter in it, whereas the Alexa Pure Pro will filter out fluoride just with the filter that it comes with. So I'll have links to both of those down in the description if you want to check them out. We have the Berkey so far. I do want to try the Alexa Pure Pro and do a comparison between those two. But so far, this is the one that we have. So this is what we consider, our main filter if we were in a long-term emergency that we would use for filtering our water at home at this point. And then the other type of water filter that we have in our home, and I've just recently discovered this brand and I really, really love it. Now this brand, it filters really great, and they actually send these filters to a lot of humanitarian aid areas, so it's used for that a lot. They're really great. This is Seychelles. And this particular bottle, this was the first product of theirs that I got because they actually have filters that are specifically designed to filter radioactive material out of water if there were a fallout situation from, a nuclear power plant meltdown or a nuclear attack of some sort. So I really love their products, their radiological products specifically. This is a bottle that filters out radiological, and they also have a straw type filter. They have all different sorts of products. I will link them down in the description box as well if you want to check out their products. They have the bottle filters, the straw filters, they have pitcher filters, they have pump filters, they have all sorts of different items for preparedness. So as you can see, there's all sorts of different methods for filtering or purifying your water. And really, it's best to have several different options available to you. And remember that you might use more than one of these options in conjunction with the other. For example, if you have a filter that fit into your budget, but you know that it doesn't filter out viruses, for example, and that's something that you're worried about, you can start by pre-filtering your water, and then you can run it through your water filter, and then you could still purify it with the bleach or the pool shock solution or the water purification tablets or any of those things. And then if you have any concerns at all about your stored water, if you should open it up to use it and you think that it has an off smell, or if it's gotten cloudy at all, by all means you would want to filter or sanitize that water before you use it as well. So you can see in creating your own emergency water plan, there's several different angles that you need to consider. Storing water in your home first. Now, how much water should you store? The absolute bare minimum that's recommended is to store 1 gallon per person in your family per day for at least 72 hours, which is 3 days. Now, also don't forget about your pets. It's recommended to store at least 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight that your pets have. And of course, if you have livestock or other animals, you need to consider them as well. But I certainly like to recommend starting small, as with anything in prepping. So with your water plan, start with the first 72 hours. Get that set first. Then expand it a little bit and expand to a week. From there, you can expand to 2 weeks. You need to look at your own situation. You need to look at your storage space and your budget to determine how much water you're going to store and how you're going to store it. Be creative when you're looking for ways to store your water. That's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that people run into with prepping, with anything, not just water. Look for places to store under beds, behind books on shelves, at the backs of closets, down low, all sorts of different places that you can store water. Think about what type of containers you want to use to store them in. Like I said, if you are on a budget, you can certainly reuse containers to store your water in, or you can buy just cheap water 1 gallon at a time and build your supply that way. If you have a little more room in your home and a little more room in your budget, there's all sorts of different options, and I'll put some of these down in the description below. I showed you what I use, and I will link to those. There's a lot of other types of storage containers that are available, and they have anything from large round containers. These are great if you have a lot of space in your basement, in a garage that's more climate controlled. A lot of the water storage containers that you'll see sold commercially are this dark blue color, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the dark color and the opacity of it helps keep sunlight and light from affecting the quality of your water. If there's sunlight getting to your water, it can grow algae. Now, the containers that I use are clear, and they wouldn't be great for long-term storage because of that, but because number one, mine are stored in a very dark corner of the basement where there's really no windows and no light, and number two, because I'm rotating those and using those regularly, I haven't had an issue. But a lot of water storage containers that you can buy commercially are that dark blue color for that reason, and also because the color blue signifies that this is water that is safe for human consumption. They have different colors of different plastic containers to signify what might be inside: water, fuel, different types of fuels. So besides the big round storage tanks, there's also a lot of smaller storage containers, and a lot of those come in a more square or rectangular shape. And I do really love that because square and rectangular containers are a much better use of space. You're not losing any space in the corners, and a lot of these will stack, and I think that's very important. There's Water Bricks, which is one very well-known brand, and if you take a look at these, they do stack. They're great. A lot of people like them. Some people have issues with, if you look at the way that the neck of the bottle is where the water comes out, you can see that you would have a hard time getting every last bit of water out of these containers. But they do stack. They store very efficiently and very easily, and they're easy to take with you. If you needed to leave your home and evacuate or bug out or anything like that, you could throw 1 or 2 of these in your car and you know you have some water with you. There's also other brands besides Water Brick. I'll link some down below. I like the ones that are square and can stack. You have that option. You don't have to stack them if you don't want to, but it's nice to have the option. And of course, you can diversify your water storage, and it's actually a really good idea to do that. Like I mentioned before, have some small bottles, have some medium-sized bottles, and have some larger containers. Now, after you have your water storage begun, the next step is to go outside of your home, go around your neighborhood and around your home, and find water sources outside that you can turn to when you run out of your stored water. If you find yourself in a long-term emergency, this is going to become crucial because you really can't store enough water to last a very long term. You might have a river, a lake, or a stream. There might be a natural spring in your area. See if you can find natural springs. There's several around our area that have wonderful water. But locate additional sources of water outside your home, and if possible, try to set up some sort of system to catch rainwater for your personal use. And next, decide on some items that you can have in your home to purify and filter your water. I've given you some options that we've used and that we're familiar with, and if you look around, there's lots of different options out there. Start with something that fits into your budget and fits into your home, and then build from there. Now, you might be able to find some large containers for storing water. If you look around locally, you might be able to find some 55-gallon drums or some IBC totes that people might be getting rid of and selling for pretty cheap. And you can use those to store water if you are comfortable with the source and if you're comfortable knowing that it's food-safe plastic and that nothing toxic was ever stored inside of those containers. So that's a call that you would have to make. But that is one option for some pretty inexpensive, large water storage containers that you can often find locally. That's actually where we got the containers for our rain barrels. A couple other items that you might want to have on hand to augment your emergency water plan. Some water flavorings, bonus if they're the kind that have electrolytes in them. This would be in case the water that you're drinking has an off taste. It could be from some of the chemicals that you use to treat it or any other reason that could make it a little bit more palatable, especially if you have children. Incidentally, if your stored water tastes a little bit flat, that's pretty normal because the oxygen has gone out of the water and we're used to drinking water that is pretty oxygenated. So you can can just oxygenate or aerate that water yourself by pouring it back and forth between 2 glasses or 2 containers. That just puts some of the oxygen back into it. If you think about it, most of our faucets have aerators on them, and we are just used to drinking water with some oxygen mixed into it. Another thing you might want to store is a medicine dropper, and that would be for if you are disinfecting with bleach or with a solution that you made up of pool shock. Oftentimes it's measured in drops, and so having a medicine dropper would be a good thing to have on hand. Another thing that we like to try to do is to make sure that our medicine cabinet is equipped with what we might need if something were to fail in our water system. Obviously, we want to have plenty of clean drinking water, and we want to have the means to make any water safe to drink. But if that should fail and something should get through, most of the problems you're going to run into from unclean water are things like parasites and bacteria, and they cause a lot of diarrhea. Things like traveler's diarrhea are caused by bacteria or parasites in the water. So keeping plenty of things like Imodium on hand, antidiarrheal medications, plenty of electrolyte solutions to help with dehydration, and things like probiotics to help replenish your gut if you were to get in trouble with something. And if it's within your budget, keeping emergency antibiotics on hand is good. Metronidazole is good for Giardia infections, and azithromycin is something that can be used for a lot of different bacterial infections that could come from unclean water. So finally, let's talk about some unexpected ways and places to store water and places to find water if you should need it in an emergency. Things that you may not have thought of. First off, if you know that you are facing a situation where you could lose your power, could lose your water, maybe you have a big storm coming, a hurricane or something like that, try filling up your bathtub with water. If you fill your bathtub with water, you'll have water that you can use for toilet flushing and sanitation. But if you go one step further, you can buy something called a water bob that you put inside of your bathtub, and it's basically a giant plastic bladder that will hold the water, and then the water is contained and it's clean and it's safe, and you could use that for drinking water. If you don't have a bathtub, at least you could fill up some of your cleaning buckets or 5-gallon pails with some extra water to have on hand just in case. Of course, those are things that you can only do if you have a little bit of warning that you might be without water. A couple other places that you can store water that you might not have thought of. If you're a canner and you do some canning like I do, you probably store lots of empty canning jars. You use the food that's in the jar, then you clean the jar and you put it away until the next time you need to use it. So why not fill those extra canning jars with water? It can add up by the pint and by the quart, and pretty soon you could have gallons and gallons of extra drinking water stored in space that you're already taking up for storage. Instead of storing the empty jars, store them full of water. You don't actually have to can this water, although some people do can it, and if you can the water, then you have sterile water, and it can be used for first aid and treating wounds and things like that. But all you have to do is just fill the jar up to the tippity top and put the lid on, and then screw it down tight, and there won't be really any airspace in there, and we know that air is one of the things that can cause things to go bad. So that water should stay pretty good, and then the next time you need to use that jar, you can just dump out the water. You can use it to water your pets, you can use it to water your plants, you could use it to fill your canner. Any of those things. Use that water, and then you have the jar ready to use, and just continue that cycle. Another thing along those same lines that I've started doing is filling my empty detergent, fabric softener, jugs like that with water. Now I make sure to label these well. I don't really think that anybody is going to decide to drink water out of a detergent jug, but just in case, I label them non-potable water. And this is water that can be used for washing and hygiene purposes like that. You could do your laundry with it in an emergency. It already has a little detergent in it. It can be used for all those types of things besides drinking water. And next, let's not overlook sources of water that you might not think of if you're in an emergency and you need clean drinking water. If you have a water heater with a tank, that's many gallons of water in there that can be accessed in an emergency. You can drain that tank into a bucket if you need that water. Another place to look, and this is one that I have a hard time with mentally, but the back tank of the toilet is actually full with a couple gallons of clean water. The only thing to be careful of here is to make sure that you've never put any kind of chemicals in the tank, like those little tablets you can put in that deodorize the toilet bowl, things like that. But you can definitely use that water for washing, even if you've done that, washing and hygiene purposes. Another source of water that you might not think about is any of your canned food. If you have canned vegetables, canned fruits, and canned meats, they're full of liquid. Now, when you drain that liquid out, you can use that. You can drink that, or you can use that in your cooking. Now, yes, that water will have some salt or some sugar in it probably, but salt is actually a necessary nutrient for your body. That's an electrolyte that we need, and sugar is something that can give us energy in the form of carbohydrates. So both of those can be beneficial to us in an emergency. So don't forget about that liquid. Don't just drain it and discard it. Definitely save that and use it. You can drink it if you really need to, or you can add it to your cooking. You could put the fruit juice into oatmeal or pancake batter or anything like that. You can throw vegetable and meat juices into a stew or into a can of soup that you're heating up, anything like that. So this has been a look at our personal emergency water system that we have set up for our family. Now, like I said, it's definitely a work in progress. It definitely has a way to go, and we're always adding to this whenever we can. But I definitely hope you found some useful tidbits in here, maybe some information that you could use, putting together your own emergency water system, or just giving yours a checkup. I'd also love to hear down in the comments, let me know what you do for your emergency water system, because everyone has different ideas and different methods, and I think we could all learn from everyone's different ideas. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you made it all the way to the end, leave me a water drop emoji down in the comments. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.